Welcome to Shadow Me Next. Today's guest does work that most people never see and very few people could actually do. Jessi Beyer is a crisis mental health clinician who responds alongside law enforcement to 911 calls involving suicidal ideation, psychosis, and severe substance use. She's also a trained negotiator on her SWAT team. When situations are volatile, emotional, and dangerous, Jessi is the mental health professional in the room, helping bring things down, keep people alive, and move them toward safety. Her path here is just as powerful. EMT training, a background in psychology, graduate work in trauma, crisis intervention, military psychology, and terrorism studies. Every piece of her story has shaped the way she shows up in moments that matter most. In this episode, we talk about de-escalation, emotional intelligence, knowing your role in medicine, and what it really means to be a steady presence in chaos. This is Shadow Me Next with Jessi Beyer. Jessi, thank you so much for joining us today on Shadow Me Next. I am thrilled to hear what you have to say and the incredible story you have to bring to us today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to talk about it and figure out how we ended up in this world that I currently work in. So I'm super happy to be here.
Which is a really incredible world and one that is, I say this to like our helicopter nurses and our critical care physicians that their life is high stress, high reward, but really nothing holds a light to what your high stress, high reward situation is, which of course we're going to break down. But Jessi, we're going to start at the beginning here because you gave me a little teaser and I just cannot wait to talk about it. Tell me how you ended up in this field of medicine, is what we're going to call it, in this field of medicine that you are experiencing right now.
Yeah, so this is definitely kind of a weird story. So going back even a little bit before the teaser that I gave you, when I was in high school, my boyfriend at the time attempted suicide. And
Oh,
that was just a really, really difficult night for me. I had been his big support system. I was the one who called 911 to prevent that attempt from being completed. And in kind of the aftermath of that, of course, law enforcement shows up. He gets taken to the hospital. There was a social worker that showed up with the cops as well. And she talked to me for a little bit, hey, are you okay? She gave me her card. If you need
mm.
anything, you can reach out. And I was like, that's cool. And then promptly put her business card in my bathroom drawer and like didn't think about it. So there was this seed that was planted in my mind that I really didn't think I could do much with. And it just kind of sat there for a while. And then when I decided I, wanted to go to college and was figuring out what I wanted to do, my freshman year of college, I actually went to veterinary school at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. For context, I grew up in Oregon, so that was quite a departure from the world that I was used to. And I got there and I was like, well, this is not what I was going to be. It was a bit of a moment of breaking the rose-colored glasses of what I
Mm-hmm.
thought veterinary medicine was. And what really crystallized that for me was recognizing that the care stops when the money runs out or the animal is no longer of value to
Mm-hmm.
the humans, not when the job is actually done. And for my personality, I'm very much a like completed at all costs type of person. And so that really, it was just like this whole moral thing of I don't think I can do this for the rest of my life. I don't even think I can do this for the rest of the 5-year degree program. So I was like, I need to get out. I need something where I can just, it's me and the patient and I can complete this job. And so I went to Canada and I got my EMT license. And I was like, I'm going to go into emergency medicine because it's just me and the patient in the back of an ambulance. And my job is to keep them alive. There's no politics involved. Anyone who works as an EMT knows that there are tons of politics in EMS, but my like naive self thought that that's what I was going to do. And I loved it. Like that EMT course that I took was one of my favorite educational experiences that I've ever had in my life. I just absolutely loved it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to stay in Canada. I'm going to get my paramedics license. I'm just going to work in emergency medicine. It's going to be great. And my parents were like, yeah, but babe, you need a college degree. Like you have to go to college. And I was like, but do I? And they're like, yes. And so I was like, fine. So I went back to the States and I finished my degree in psychology at the University of Minnesota. It was a bit of a protest degree, I will say. I was kind of like, I don't really want to be here. I don't know what I want to do, but psych is somewhat interesting to me. And so what the heck, I'll go ahead and do it. And one of my elective classes my senior year maybe my junior year, one of my last 2 years, was on nature-based therapies. And that really turned the tide for
Mm-hmm.
me because that piqued this interest for me. Back after my high school boyfriend had attempted suicide, I went to 1 day of therapy after that. And it
Wow.
was traditional talk therapy, like nothing
Mm-hmm.
crazy. I hated it. I was so uncomfortable. I literally ran out of the building, like full on running out of the building. And I never went back. And I thought that that was my option, was like talk therapy or bust,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, as I was trying to heal from this. And so learning that there are these other modalities that are out there, there's other ways to heal from traumatic events, that really got me back interested in the world of psychology. So ended up finishing that degree. My capstone was on different integrative trauma therapies, movement based, nature based, animal assisted, all these different things. And then I just started speaking and talking, and I did a lot of work in education, peer support education, integrative therapy education for a number of years until I landed in the space that I landed in now, which, as we talked about in the intro, I do crisis mental health work alongside law enforcement. I'm a negotiator on our SWAT team. And another little breadcrumb for this is after I graduated college, undergrad, before I went to grad school, I did a ride along with our local deputy and his mental health professional partner, and we went to a call where it was a domestic violence situation, and they ended up having a negotiator come out. And I remember sitting in the back of this patrol car, and I'm like, "Hey, that's kind of cool. Like,
Mm-hmm.
could I ever do that?" And they're like, "No, you have to be a cop to be a negotiator." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And again, filed it in the bathroom drawer, kind of thing. And ended up being a negotiator, not being a cop. So it's interesting how this world comes together. And I guess in that process, I skipped over grad school, which was pretty important. For me, I took a couple years between undergrad and grad school. I really am glad that I did that. I was told, if you stop school, you're never going to go back. And I
Mm-hmm.
have learned through my own experience and through the experience of a lot of my friends that that is not the case.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a couple years, and then I went to grad school for critical psychology and human services. And I focused a lot of my education on trauma and crisis intervention. So I got to design some of my own courses. For example, I took a course on PTSD in military and first responder populations. I took a course entirely on sexual assault, which sounds
Mm.
like very heavy and traumatic, but was just wildly interesting to delve into all the different elements of that. So really amazing educational experience. Took another couple years off and then went back and got a second master's in military psychology with a focus in terrorism. And all of these like weird educational things that I've done over my life have set me up really well for the work that I do now and given me a very unique perspective to bring to the table. So yeah, in like a very long nutshell, that is my journey to where I am today.
It's such a cool journey. And I love it because even just speaking with you briefly for a couple of minutes, all of a sudden, all of these different elements, all of these different pieces of your life have really beautifully just combined into this perfect role for you, really. And you
Yes.
mentioned a couple of things, and I'm so glad that you brought them up. First of all, you just lit up when you talked about your time as an EMT in Canada. And I love to hear that because I think so often people think of their role as an EMT as being perhaps a stepping stone to something else. Like, so for
Mhm.
example, I'm a PM, a physician assistant, and a lot of students will get their patient contact hours as EMTs. And speaking with so many of my colleagues, they say, Ashley, I almost did not go to PA school after this because I enjoyed being an EMT so much. So I'm so glad you brought that up. It's such a fantastic career. And I would imagine really, really, really set you up for the work that you do right now, communicating with some of the different people, law enforcement agencies, fire departments, SWAT. It's a whole different lingo, right? And you speak it, I would imagine, largely because of some of the stuff you encountered as an EMT.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a wonderful, wonderful career. And through my work as an EMT, I got to do a lot of like sports events and youth sports
Mm.
events, which being a child athlete myself, I was like, this is so cool. I'm back in basketball land. So that was really fun. And then I also did work as an EMT with search and rescue. So now we're talking like backcountry, austere, like things are breaking and we have to fix it with a stick kind of thing. Hopefully that's why I'm there as I bring more stuff, but it's that type of environment. And just all these amazing experiences. And so,
Mm.
for any of your listeners, any of your audience that is considering emergency medicine as a path, I will say now, I love working with EMTs in the role that I have now because they are often the ones that law enforcement and I show up first. We do safety checks, immediate de-escalation, whatever that is. And then if the person needs to get transported to the hospital, I'm not driving them. The cop isn't driving them. It's an EMT crew that comes and takes them. So being able to hand off to them, not only speak their language to have that professional relationship, but also that empathetic touch that EMT
Mm.
brings, because they have that ride to the hospital to just chit chat with that person. Like there's no medical intervention necessarily that needs to be done. But if you're thinking about a career in emergency medicine, it's not just I'm treating heart attacks and I'm treating broken bones. It's I'm talking to a kid that wants to kill themselves, or
Hmm.
I'm running around with a search and rescue dog trying to find someone lost in the middle of the woods. Like there's so many different elements to that career field. And whether it's a stepping stone or a permanent place, like I think it's a wonderful entry into medicine.
No, I totally agree. It is a fantastic opportunity to really see humanity, unfortunately, at its most significantly painful moments, which
Mhm.
we're going to talk a lot about here in just a couple of minutes. But before we get too far into that, let's talk about your role, because I think it is just so interesting. So you sit at this crossroads, right, of medicine, of mental health, and of public safety, which I think
Mhm.
is such a cool and unique place for you to be. Tell us what you do when you go on scene with law enforcement or fire rescue. When you show up in the morning, what does your job look like?
Yeah. Well, I will specify that I don't show up in the morning. I show up at night. So I work I work swing shift, which is 2 to midnight. And the reason that I highlight that is for a number of different reasons. But one is that's when a lot of crises happen. And so if you're working in any sort of first response or emergency healthcare, might not be a 9 to 5. So just kind of prepare yourself for that. And the other thing is that oftentimes I'm the only mental health resource that's available at that time. Private practice is closed. Substance use disorder treatment centers are closed. It's kind of just me. And so I frame that before going into like what I
Hmm.
actually do. So I respond alongside mostly law enforcement, sometimes EMS, sometimes both, to 911 calls that have some sort of behavioral health element. And the three most common ones for me are suicidal ideation, psychosis, and substance use challenges, and or a conglomeration of multiple of those. When I show up on scene, my role is twofold. One is the immediate de-escalation. So we've had folks that have knives. We have folks that are screaming bloody murder. We have folks running down the middle of the highway at 2 in the morning. How do we take this from level 10 to like maybe a level 3 or 4 where we can
Mm.
actually have a conversation about next steps? Part two of my role is what are those next steps? I always tell people I would be a terrible private practice therapist. God bless people that do that, but that is not me. I love the immediate work and then passing them off to someone else for longer term care. And so part of my role is that pass off, right? What resources are available? Where can we put you or take you or connect you with so that you don't continue having these crises? How can we reduce the reliance on the 911 system, on hospitalization, look at community based care? And that really spans everything from securing bus tickets for people, like bus passes, housing, treatment for mental health, for physical health, for substance use disorders. We have a specific resource in our county for temporary fostering of pets while people go to detox. And so it's this interesting world of knowing all of these different resources, knowing who has a wait list, who doesn't, how do you access it, what are the access criteria and admission criteria, and kind of crafting this plan with the client of, okay, great, we fixed the immediate crisis, we're no longer screaming, what do we do now, where do we take you next? And so that is just as much a part of my job as that immediate de-escalation risk assessment type stuff that I do.
That is so cool. Thank you for breaking that down so well for us. I think there's a couple of ways I want to go with this. Number one, immediate de-escalation. I'm like, I'm having flashbacks to moments of like the last 3 days with my children, really, because there's so many times I've said, "Is this a crisis? Are we in crisis right now?" And they've said, "No." I'm like, "Well, then why are we screaming? Let's please calm
Yes.
down." But the immediate de-escalation, I would love to hear some of the tools that you use for that, right? And this is number one, this is for your role because obviously you use this every day. I in dermatology, I am not chasing people down a highway usually. However, there are definitely moments when I realize I've walked into a situation that's very, very hot, very, very
Mhm.
tense for whatever reason. Now, it's not as typically as dangerous as your situations, but knowing some of these tools for de-escalation, especially in healthcare, is super important to get to the point quickly with some of these patients.
Mhm.
So what are, tell us a few, if you can, some of these tools that you use.
Absolutely. I'll ground this in a scenario that happened a couple months ago, perhaps. I took a client to the hospital. She had been endorsing suicidal ideation. She wasn't willing to do a safety plan and stay at home. So we're like, okay, we're going to the hospital.
Mm.
And this particular client's story, she had a very difficult sexual relationship with her husband, a lot of coercion, a lot of obligatory interactions there, just very not healthy, lots of trauma background going on there. And so we're in this hospital room and the nurse comes in and is like, "Okay, I need to draw your blood." And she's like, "No, you don't. Why do you need to draw my blood right now?" And they started kind of going back and forth at that. And the nurse just got stuck in this cycle of, "Well, I understand what you're going through." And the client was like, "No, you don't. You
Mm-hmm.
have no idea what I'm going through." "No, trust me, I do. I've seen a lot of people in your position." "Yeah, but you don't understand what I'm going through." And just button heads. And I was standing in the room and I could just feel the tension in everyone just start going up. And I think that that happens a lot because as healthcare workers, especially in the emergency department, you kind of have seen it all. Like you've probably seen people in very similar situations to this woman's situation. And so in your mind, you're like, no, I get it. Like I've seen people in your situation before. But in that client's mind, they're like, no, you haven't. You don't know my story. You don't know my situation. You don't know what's going on with me. And so I say all of that to highlight the point that the biggest thing that you can do in terms of de escalation is set aside yourself, set aside what you've seen, your experience, your
Mm.
perception of this client, and sit with that person in their moment of pain. So that can kind of take one of two ways. If you have a very sad, depressed, crying, that type of person, it's going to be calmer. You know, this is more of my client voice when I'm talking with someone who's in that type of emotional state. And it's very validating and labeling emotions. And yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're really, really going through a hard divorce right now. Like, whatever that is, right? It's getting on
Mm-hmm.
their level. It's that calm type of reflecting the emotions that they're sharing with you. If you have someone who's coming in and they're screaming and they're mad and they're this, I'm going to reflect that a little bit. It's going to be more, yeah, dude, I get it. Like, you were out there, you were just minding your own business, and then all of a sudden you're hogtied and brought to the hospital. I'm doing the same skill of reflecting the emotion of I don't want to be here. I was brought here against my will. I'm frustrated, I'm mad, I'm whatever, but I'm matching that a little bit and then slowly working my way back down. Sometimes it works if you can come in with a really, really escalated person and you are like barely speaking because then they're
Mm.
like, "I can't hear you." And then they bring themselves down immediately as well. But sitting with them in that space sometimes means you're mad with them. And so if you can bring yourself to that level, have that conversation, usually what happens with folks that are really, really escalated is if you can get one really good reflection in there. So one sentence of, "Yeah, it sounds like you were minding your own business." And then all of a sudden, all these cops showed up. Or, "Yeah, it sounds like you were having a really difficult fight with your wife. And then she threw in this really hard insult or whatever." I don't know, whatever it is. If you can get one really good one of those in there, they will go from a 10 to a 6 almost instantaneously. And one story for this, just to put a little bit more color to it, we were out on a SWAT call. I think it was like 3 in the morning. And this kid, he was about 10 years old. He had just watched his father shoot his grandfather. And he got drug out of bed by law enforcement to get him out of the house, to get him
Mm.
to safety. And so I'm talking with him and he's pacing, he's talking a million miles an hour. He's talking about like 3 levels of volume louder than he needs to be, and just going on about how disappointed he is in his dad and how his dad hasn't been there for birthdays and hasn't done this and hasn't done that and all these different things. And he just was like at his dad. And I said to him, I was like, "Hey, it sounds like you've been looking for more from your dad for a really long time." And he was like, "Yeah." And his whole posture changed. He sat down on the curb, he lowered his volume, he slowed his speech. And so, just that one line, I was even sitting there being like, that worked better than I thought it was going to work. Like, I shocked myself with how that line worked. It's not always that easy. But my point is, if you can get that one good reflection, one moment of rapport, that is often enough to take a really escalated person down a few notches, and then as a provider, help ensure your safety in that situation as well.
Absolutely. It's reading between the lines, and it's so much easier said than done. It's hearing what they're saying without saying it, right? I like to call it the hidden gem in clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's something that they say offhanded as an aside, that if you can recognize it, if you can pick it up, and just try to scooch it in as well. I mean, you can attack it. You cannot attack these things. But if you just kind of ease into it, like you mentioned, I heard you say X, Y, and Z, and oh, by the way, this one too,
Mm-hmm.
they feel heard, they feel understood. And like you said, it can absolutely de-escalate a situation. Or even, and even if they are already calm and collected, but maybe withdrawn and not sharing, sometimes it can help open them up as well. So, oh, thank you so much for sharing those. Those are really, really good examples. I love it. And something that
Of
before I
course.
move on that I want to touch on real quick. You mentioned that most of the calls that you go to late at night are suicidal ideation, psychosis, and substance use. But then you just mentioned a 10-year-old. Do you see adults and children then? Are you involved in both?
Yes. So the youngest client that I've ever had was 6, and the oldest was late 80s, early 90s, I think. Somewhere in that
Wow.
about to go into the nursing home type of age range.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I respond to everything. Anything that touches the 911 system. We have a lot of parents that call in on their kids because the we have it's funny. I'm going to say this, and for me, this is like, oh, this is a Tuesday, and it's going to sound wild to anyone who is not a part of my world. We have a kid who his parents call 911 on him a lot because he continually tries to kill his dad with a knife. And so we're figuring out how to navigate that situation. So we have that side of things. We have a lot of folks that call in on loved ones who have endorsed suicidal ideation in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So husband sent me a text saying goodbye for real, or daughter posted a bottle of pills on Snapchat. We get a lot of those. And then we get a lot of concerned citizen calls for the person who's running down the highway at 2 in the morning or different things like that. So it is a very, very wide group of people that I work with.
Which I think is really interesting. And because there's certain elements of medicine, as you can imagine, that are very, very focused when it comes to who you see and what you do. And this career sounds like it's very broad, which I think to some people, to a lot of people, would be quite interesting. Um, you mentioned a couple of things that I think are really hot in media right now, and that is recognizing some of these signs that we're seeing of suicidal ideation, primarily self harm, things like that, which this is something that you see all the time, all day, every day. And of course, we want people to report this. Any little thing, it is absolutely worth checking up on. Let's keep each other safe. The whole 9 yards. What does success for you look like in crisis negotiation, even when sometimes the outcomes maybe aren't perfect?
That is an amazing question. Like, wow. First of all, awesome. I love that question. For me, um, the first thing that comes to mind, and this is maybe a bit simplistic, but it's keeping them alive.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I say that, I mean, everyone's like, oh, it's healthcare. Of course, our goal is to keep them alive. But there's a lot of commentary in the media right now
Mm-hmm.
about, well, law enforcement just arrests people that have mental health challenges and we just take them to jail. And there's all these things that are, wrong with that. And I agree, jail is not the ideal situation for folks, right? That's not the ideal healing scenario. But when intensive outpatient has wait lists a mile long, when
Mm-hmm.
inpatient is full and there's no beds available, I can't get someone well if they are not alive. And so if that means that they're going to the
Yes.
hospital or they're going to jail, that's a win. I
Mm-hmm.
would say that my, ideal situation is this a terribly depressed teenager that I speak with, and then we make this amazing safety plan, and then they're de-escalated and they get to stay at home and they go to school the next day, and they email me 6 months later and they tell me that they're doing amazingly. I've had those. I had this one kiddo that I took her to the hospital dozens of times. Law enforcement used force on her dozens of times to get her to the hospital. Just chronic suicidal ideation. And I was giving her parents like resources left, right, and center. I could not figure out what to do with this kiddo. And then she just dropped off the face of the earth for like 6 months. And I was talking with my law enforcement partners, and they're like, yeah, we haven't heard from her either. And I was like, well, she's either better or she's dead. And I don't know which. And I heard from my deputy a couple months after that. He's like, hey, I ran into her in a coffee shop. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, she's doing amazing. Like she went to inpatient treatment down in California for a couple months. She got a job. She's training her service dog. Like she's doing so well. And she told me to tell you thank you. And this client emails me every couple months. I get a little email in my inbox that's like update. And then she tells me some new things that are going on in
Oh,
her life. So those are like amazing wins. And I love those and I cherish those. And when I don't have good calls, those are the ones that I go back to of like, no, you're still good at your job. It's okay. You still help people. But at the end of the day, it is keeping them alive enough to get them to a longer term resource is really what success looks like in my role in some of these complex situations.
thank you for that answer. It is like you said, it seems like a very simplistic idea, but you're right. And a lot of people might not view that as an ideal success. But I really, the picture that you just painted of, I can't help somebody if they're dead. And if they're in jail, most likely they're still alive. It
Mhm.
reminds me a lot of the situations when people go to the emergency room, which I'm sure as an EMT, you saw this. People have these chronic, lifelong conditions. And for whatever reason, that day they've chosen today is the day that I'm going to go to the ER and get answers. That's not what the ER is for. You're going to show up to the ER. They're going to see, are you going to die in a couple of minutes? No, we're getting you out of the ER. You know, that's kind of
Yes.
similar. So it really highlights the fact that as clinicians and as people looking to healthcare as a career, you have to know your role in medicine, and we each play a role in medicine, right? You've mentioned before, which I do want to come back to as well, that you appreciate the fact that you see people in crisis and mental health crises, but you are not managing their care long term. There are other clinicians who I'm sure would not know what to do in crises and serious. They don't know how to chase somebody down the interstate, right? But they appreciate that long-term care relationship. This is the same thing, you know. We have to manage our expectations as clinicians and what type of medicine we're going to enter, and as patients we have to manage their expectations of what they're going to get in that area of medicine, right? It's why our ERs are so busy right now. As like I said, as an EMT, I'm like preaching to the choir right now.
Yeah, yeah. And frankly, I've been in the ER more as a mental health professional than I was as an EMT because we get a lot of folks that end up there as well. But your point is so valid, and that's something that I think I kind of had to learn the hard way when I got into this field because I definitely came into it a little bit arrogant. I was like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
the mental health professional. I know what to do. I'm going to get these people connected with this resource and that resource, and they're going to be fine. I'm never going to see them again. Obviously, it doesn't happen that way, and so I had to recognize that my role is this 10 to 60 minutes that I have with you. And if I can be a little bright spot in your chaos darkness of a life, I have done my job.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever happens once I take them to the hospital or once I refer them to detox or once I find them housing, like that's out of my control. What they do in that situation, as well as what that provider does in that situation. But I can be really, really, really good at my 10 to 60 minutes. And that's really what I focused on. And I would encourage anyone who's going into healthcare, exactly like you were saying, know your lane, be really, really, really good at your lane, and let everything else go, or you're going to drive yourself absolutely crazy.
I love that. That is just like, oh, can we like paint that in glowing gold letters and just plaster it everywhere? It would be incredible. Okay, let's shift just a little bit because I would like to talk a little bit more about mental health in the grand scheme of things in medicine as a whole. Um, in your opinion, how has embedding the mental health clinicians that you see that you work with, that you are in the first responder systems? So this is, you know, coming in with police officers, mainly police officers, firefighters as well, changed outcomes? How have you seen it improve the lives of these clients that you're seeing?
It's been revolutionary. And I want to start this conversation by saying that I love my law enforcement partners. Like, I think the absolute world of them. I am so
Mm-hmm.
lucky to work with them. I really just every day I walk into work and I'm like, I love you guys. And they're like, shut up, Jessi. And I was like, I know, but I love you guys. So we we have an amazing amazing relationship, but this integration of mental health into law enforcement is beneficial for a bunch of different ways and reasons.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, no one, very few people at least, go into law enforcement wanting to deal with people in mental health crisis. They go in for the burglaries and the fights and the shootings and all these different things. Generalization, right? Of course there's different folks in different places, but they don't go into it to talk to the suicidal person for 3 hours. And so for me to come in and say, hey, you don't want to do that? I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Right. Let's do that trade-off there. It allows me to take a little bit more time, have a little bit more understanding. And then also bringing that additional knowledge. Cops, especially in the US, are tasked with so many things that is not actually part of their job description. They are the dumpsters of humanity. And I mean that in the best possible way, in that when
Mm-hmm.
people don't know what to do with something, they have law enforcement handle it. And so they have such a wide breadth of responsibility and things that they do and are involved in and are responsible for that are not really law enforcement. and they don't have the adequate training for that. I mean, yes, a lot of departments go through maybe 40 hours of mental health related training. That's amazing. I love it. I have 2 graduate degrees in the space. Like there's just a different level of education there. Just like I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to writing a warrant or arresting someone. Like I don't know, different lanes, right? And so me being able to bring that additional expertise, communicate with them of like, hey, this person isn't trying to be combative right now. They're actually experiencing tardive dyskinesia and blah, 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 blah. And like explain what's going on to them can change the outcomes of
Mm-hmm.
that. And then additionally, having the knowledge of those different resources, like they will just call me and be like, I don't know what to do with this person. What do I do with them? And I was like, okay, great. Well, you can send them here and here's a referral and here's a phone number for this. Taking that responsibility of having those additional resources upon myself means that law enforcement doesn't have to, but then also the clients have kind of this one-stop shop of where they can get referrals to different places. The other thing that I'll say is that a lot of times the addition of a mental health professional or the addition of a crisis negotiator on a SWAT call reduces the use of force. And I have looked for studies to back up the numbers on this, and they don't exist, but this is just me speaking experientially. There have been a lot of calls where if I was not there and I was not able to talk the person into the ambulance, or one of my negotiators was not able to talk the person out of the house, there would have been force used, there would have been gas bombs thrown in the house, there would have been, all these different things that maybe would have escalated that situation. But because we come with a different perspective and a different personality and a different base of knowledge, those outcomes are potentially different. Not all the time, doesn't always work. But in terms of negotiations, at least the statistic out there is like, if we can get on the phone with them, about 80% of the time, we're able to negotiate them out instead of having to use force. So there's that element to it as well. Very rambling answer, but those are some of the benefits
No,
of implementing mental health. Yeah.
not rambling at all. No, that was fantastic. Great examples as well. And I would imagine, we were TV is not real life. And we watch all the SWAT shows and we see them busting into houses and they're like so excited about it and they love it so much. And I would imagine there are some people that do love that. However, I would also imagine that most of them are thrilled to have you so that they don't have to do that, so that they don't have to traumatize this person where they're not out to traumatize people, right? Yeah.
No, absolutely not. Just a note on TV before I actually respond to that. I love the show Criminal Minds. I watched Criminal Minds like religiously when I was a kid. It makes me so angry because everything that they do negotiation wise in that show is like wildly inaccurate. And I'm like, no, we would never do that. That doesn't work that way. So yes, not real life. In terms of your actual point here, it's very, very true. There are 100% people that are like, hell yeah, I want to go boot down the door. Have moments of hell yeah, I'd like to go boot down the
Yeah.
door. As a mental health professional, like we all have those moments of, yeah, we want to get in there, we want to go after it. But there's also times where they don't. And for example, we had a client one time, 400-pound trained MMA fighter, floridly psychotic,
Oh
and there
no.
was a warrant out for his arrest. And so I call him, and the first thing he says is like, what do you want? If any cops come to my door, I'm going to fight them. And he had a history of fighting law enforcement. And I ended up talking him out of the house. It was peaceful. He got arrested. It was all good. But I was talking to my sergeant afterwards, who's on the SWAT team, and he was like, I am so glad you were here because I did not want to get in that fight. And I knew that if we got into that fight, he was going to the hospital and we were
Yeah.
probably going to the hospital too.
Mm-hmm.
And so there very much is that perspective of, yes, okay, harm reduction is amazing, but I am literally preventing sometimes my deputies and my clients from getting punched in the face. And that feels really good, like to be able to have that influence and just keep the physical safety of people safe as well.
Which is incredible too, because this is a very much of a side note, but your hobbies are incredibly physical and very, very tough. So, I could probably bet on you against a 400-pound MMA fighter. I feel like you could probably take him even if you wanted to. But again, that is an aside. We do not have to go there, but definitely check out Jessi's Instagram and some of the really, really cool things that she's doing there. Let's talk directly to our clinicians now and our future clinicians. What do you wish that every future clinician or current clinician understood about suicide risk that we are missing?
Yes. This is where I get on my soapbox. In specifically primary care, about 75% of people that die by suicide have seen their primary care physician in the year before they died.
Mm.
And in most primary care settings, there is no screening, there's no discussion. At most, on an intake checklist, there's have you experienced thoughts of harming yourself or others? Yes or no? And then that's kind of the end of the discussion. Primary care physicians, clinicians in general, and I'm almost intentionally excluding emergency clinicians here because they get this all the time. Like that's a pretty
Mm-hmm.
common part of their life. But like everyone else, you are in a prime situation to screen for patients that are experiencing suicidal ideation, to do risk assessments, to do referrals, and to literally save these people's lives just by asking a few questions. And that is what I get incredibly passionate about when talking to healthcare teams, because they're like, oh, I'm a dentist, right? Or I'm primary care, or I'm an OBGYN, like whatever. I'm not dealing with people in crisis. And what I tell them is that, yes, you are. You just
Mm-hmm.
don't know that your people are in crisis,
Mm-hmm.
or they're presenting with some sort of somatic symptom that is, a chronic stomach ache or chronic headache, or their acne has flared up out of the blue, or whatever that is. Putting those pieces together and understanding, not to get like too woo with it, but like the mind body connection and the fact that what's going on upstairs is going to be reflected in the rest of the body, recognizing that, understanding that, and taking the 5 minutes to sit down with your patient and say, hey, how you doing? Like, just tell me about your life. I hear that you're here for a stomach ache, but what else is going on for you?
Mm-hmm.
No one does that. No one does that. And so taking that time, they might say, "Oh yeah, it's okay. Work's been, up and down lately, but all in all, things are good." Okay, up and down. What do you mean by that? What's been going on there? Oh well, actually, I just got fired recently. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now we're digging in and we're having this conversation, and you're learning things about your patients that you wouldn't if you just had that intake checkbox, "Do you want to die or not?" type of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
you as a clinician, right? You are at this critical juncture where you can intervene in your patients' lives in ways that you probably don't think you can, and that statistically you absolutely need to.
You're right. And it does take a minute. And I think that as clinicians, we hear that and we think, well, I only have 20 minutes times 30 appointments throughout the day. But each of those 30 appointments, you're not going to be having this conversation, right? I mean, this
Right.
is something that maybe you pick up a handful of times and you address it, and most people will just blow you off, or there's actually nothing wrong. But that one person that there is, that one person that you really get to tap into, there's this happened to me in clinic, and I am in dermatology. So
Mm.
very much in that whole realm of things. We had a patient come in. She was very hesitant to disrobe, to take her clothes off, which is
Mm.
kind of part of derm. If you're there for us to look at your skin, we have to be able to see your skin.
Yeah.
Extremely hesitant, to the point where my medical assistant came, got me, and said, hey, listen, I don't think we're going to be able to do this, etc. I walked in just so that she could meet me, even if we weren't doing a skin check that day. Recognized something, I don't know, a little, that spidey sense, right?
Hmm.
And we dove into it a little bit. She's a sexual assault survivor,
Hmm.
literally within the last number of weeks, but she didn't want to cancel the appointment because she's trying to normalize her life, which I was so proud of her for doing, etc. um, we didn't take her clothes off at that appointment. We sat there, and I had a 20-minute appointment slot. So we talked for 20 minutes, right? And then I said, hey, when you're ready, I would love for you to come back in. How can we make this comfortable for you? How can we make this appropriate for you so that I can check the areas of your skin that you want me to check? And we did. And you know what? Every single time she comes in, she brings a gift, which is so sweet. She does not have to do that. But I'm just so grateful because first of all, she has gorgeous skin. So she doesn't need to be there to see me. But I'd like to think that that positive experience is hopefully going to fuel other positive experiences for her in healthcare, to where she can go back to see her GYN, and she can get those routine exams, and she can see her male PCP. Like you said, sometimes it just takes that one brief moment. And it's one of my absolute most favorite stories in healthcare. And it started off with something so miserably, painfully sad, and a terrible conversation that I had to have with a patient. But oh, what a great relationship it is now. It's
Yeah.
really, really cool.
That's amazing. And I know that you are not the one being interviewed, Ashley, but like that story just, oh my gosh. I mean, it warms my heart so much. It's
Yeah.
obviously terrible and traumatic, and it makes me sad at the same time.
Hmm.
But knowing that there are providers like you out there that took that time, that saw that warning sign and did something with it, like just gives me so much hope. And I'm not overstating this. Like I'm saying this as someone who sees crisis every single day, sees sexual assault survivors every single day. Um, you may have saved her life. At the
Mm.
very least,
Mm.
you changed the trajectory of her life dramatically. And her life could have taken a very, very different turn if she didn't have those 20 minutes with you. And so, for everyone who's listening, who's considering going into healthcare, who's already in healthcare, obviously you want to help people, you want to make a difference in people's lives, but maybe you're in a field where you're like, I don't save lives, like I help people, but I'm not saving lives in this profession. You are, and you can. You just
Hmm.
have to take those few minutes and have that conversation and invest that time in someone who, yeah, came for her skin, but she needed an ear and a shoulder and someone to be there with her. And you gave her that. And that's amazing. And it makes me very
Oh,
happy.
yeah, I never even thought of it that way, Jessi. But you're right. I mean, you're right. Obviously, this is this is what you do. You're absolutely right. And to me, it was just 20 minutes, but who knows what it was for her. Oh my gosh! Before we really wrap up, if this conversation is just really influencing you and you want to know more, I would highly recommend you pick up Jessi's book. It's called How to Heal: A Practical Guide to 9 Natural Therapies You Can Use to Release Your Trauma. And this is amazing because it sounds like it was written for trauma survivors, for people who've experienced trauma. But I will tell you, as a clinician, this book is invaluable because I'm going to be, I have, as I've mentioned, talked to these people and having some of these tools that you've talked about, things like eye movement desensitization, dance movement therapy, canine assisted therapy, which of course, knowing your background and as a maybe veterinary medicine practitioner at one point, this makes a lot of sense. Equine, of course, as well. Ecotherapy and nature-based therapies. These things are amazing and just would give people so much hope to, like I said, to come to your dermatologist and have your dermatologist talking about different therapies that they've learned from you. Um, and just tell us a little bit about this book, who it was written for, and what you hope to do with it.
Yeah, so this book was a passion project for me, and it really was born out of my own experience. Like I mentioned, thinking that I either could go to talk therapy or I had nothing, and I had to
Mm-hmm.
kind of figure it out by myself. And I realized that that wasn't the case. There are other modalities out there. And so this is really written for the person who has tried the traditional trauma therapies and they haven't worked for them. And I will go into that in just a second, or for the people who don't want to try. They're uncomfortable with that for some reason. There's some part of their story that doesn't align with that, and they're looking for something else. So these are all wonderfully rich methods of healing from trauma: body based, movement based, nature, animals, all these different things, very holistic methods of healing from trauma that are also
Mm-hmm.
empirically supported. Because I'm as much of a data nerd as I am like this woo woo, fluffy, hug a dog and feel better type of person. So they're really wonderful modalities there. In terms of kind of traditional trauma treatment, when I reference that, the American Psychological Association recommends a few talk based therapies and then some
Mm-hmm.
medications for trauma treatment. So we're looking at cognitive behavioral therapy, we're looking at exposure therapy. Those are kind of the two biggest ones. And then your combination of SSRIs and SNRIs for medication based trauma treatment. And the APA, the American Psychological Association, likes to kind of tout these as the gold standard and everything else is subpar. And if you really dive into the literature on these different modalities, depending on the study, it's about 50% of people that achieve benefit from those
Mm-hmm.
therapies. And then if you get even further into that, you have to determine whether benefit means a statistically significant reduction in clinical symptoms or a reduction in symptoms to a level below the diagnostic criteria. Because
Mm.
some of these studies, to simplify the diagnostics on it, let's say that you come in with 10 out of 10 on the trauma scale, on the PTSD scale, and then the baseline for diagnosis is a 5. So you have to at least get a 5 to be diagnosed with PTSD, but this person comes in with a 10. Well, they got down to an 8 because of this treatment. Yay, it's a huge success. They still have PTSD. Like they're still
Big time.
incredibly symptomatic from this. And so as you're reading these studies, you really have to get into like, what is considered a success? Is it clinical remission or is it a significant reduction in symptomology? Both are
Mm-hmm.
good, but it lands differently depending on what you're looking at there. So my point of that is there's a lot of folks that are helped by these therapies, and I love those therapies for those people. There's also a very large chunk of people that are not. And what happens in this American Psychological Association based world of treatment that we live in is one of two things. The patient gets blamed. So there's a lot of studies out there that talk about, well, patient noncompliance and patient refusal to engage and all these different
Mm.
things. And my response to that is, if your therapy is so traumatic that no one wants to do it, it doesn't work. Like it's not good enough. We need to amend that. So that is one thing that'll happen is the patient will get blamed, or they will be told there's nothing else. There's nothing else out there for you. You either have to do this or you're on your own. And so my book was really created for that person who's been in that experience to say, hey, it's not your only option. There are other things out there. And it's very much written human to human. It's not clinical language. It's me just blabbing like I am right now about all these different modalities. So it's very approachable. In a lot of them, I actually went to that therapy. And so I talk about, here was my experience. Here's what we did. Here's what it felt like. Here were the revelations that I went through, and getting kind of personal with some of that. So people can maybe experience a session before they actually have to go themselves. And so, yeah, I mean, that's my goal with it is spread awareness, spread hope, and spread options for people that are looking to heal, but don't feel like the traditionally presented options are going to work for them.
Oh my God. Awareness, hope, and options. Could we want nothing more? It's just a fantastic gift that you have given. The book, again, is called How to Heal, a Practical Guide to 9 Natural Therapies You Can Use to Release Your Trauma. It's available on Amazon. And if you guys have fallen in love with Jessi as much as I have, please check her out on Instagram. It's Jessi Beyer. That's Jessi Beyer. It's Jessi Beyer. Check her out on LinkedIn, same name. And then, of course, on her website, jessibeyerinternational.com. Jessi, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. I am so glad to know that there are people like you out there meeting us in our deepest and darkest moments. And like you said, you are just this small beacon of light. And thanks for joining us on Shadow Me Next and sharing your story today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And anyone who's listening, if you're curious about this field, it is new-ish. Like we're kind of on the forefront of it. So if you have questions, if you're like, I'm curious about it, I want to try it, I want to learn more about it, like shoot me a DM, shoot me an email. I'm happy to just talk about what I do and help you figure out if it's something that you're interested in as well.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Jessi.